Hi, this is Kevin's European Garage, and today I'm going to do a long-term review on this 2013 Porsche Cayenne. I've had this car for the last 4.5 years, and it's been my daily driver, so I've got a lot to talk about with this, so stay tuned. So like I said, this car has been my daily driver for the last 4.5 years, and I wouldn't say it hasn't been exactly trouble-free. There have been some little things go wrong with it, so I'll just start right at the beginning. So I bought this car with 40,000 miles on it, and now it's got about 91,000 miles on it. And when I first got it, before the factory warranty was out on it, I had them replace the fuel level sending unit because all of a sudden my fuel gauge stopped working. And ever since then, it's never been a problem. Transfer case has been an issue. And I think, for the most part, I have it figured out. They say that this, fluid is lifetime, or I would, what I guess what the lifetime is, maybe 100,000 miles or something like that. But the transfer case fluid's got to be changed much sooner than that. I think a lot of this would be eliminated, all the problems, if we just started changing these things at like 30,000 miles. I started having issues, started showing up around, maybe I would say about 68,000, 70,000 miles when I started having problems with this thing. And that's when I went through, and that's when I started trying the flushing. And but you can check out my video on that for all the details on that one. All I know is that right now, after changing it 4 times, it seems like it's pretty good. And when I go to do my next oil change in about 2,000 miles, I'm going to flush the fluid again. The strut hatches, like the motors, the motors are built into the actual struts themselves. So I've had a couple of those go bad. Luckily enough, they went bad before the warranty was out, so I had Porsche fix them for me, and they've been fine ever since. And then the other issue that I had with this thing was the water pump. So the water pump started leaking pretty much straight right at 60,000 miles. That's obviously a known issue with this car, and I would definitely more than expect to do it around 60,000 miles. If you're trying to do it yourself, it's really not that bad of a job. I ended up using a VW pump. And what I did with the VW pump is the pulley is different on it, but the pump itself is all the same. So all I did was swap the pulley from the Porsche pump to the VW pump, and I saved myself a little bit of money that way. The PCV valve went, and that's also another common issue. The way that they designed it, I think they really did it poorly, and it's like this with like all VW cars, a lot of BMW cars. Like they put the PCV valve right inside the valve cover, and some of those cars, it's not that big of a deal to change. You pop the valve cover off. You change the PCV valve and you put it back on again. Well, this one, you can't just pull the valve cover off. You got to take the intake manifold off. You take the intake manifold off, you got to pull out the high pressure fuel pump. So it's a lot of work just to change a PCV valve. And then Porsche doesn't sell the PCV valve. You have to buy a whole valve cover. So that's where the aftermarket came in, and you can get a PCV valve for 20-something bucks. For a $20 item, they make you go through all this work. So I think they really could have done better as far as the design on it. So the latest issue that I got with the car now is that both my flex sections, right after the catalytic converters, both of them are starting to go bad, and then they rattle. They rattle going over bumps. They rattle up on startup. The aftermarket doesn't really have a solution for this, and I really don't feel like spending all that kind of money on buying new catalytic converter assemblies from Porsche. I'm in a quest to try to figure out what I'm going to do, and unfortunately it's not like I can bring it to a muffler shop where it's easy, where they can just go up there and they can just replace it. The flex sections are above the subframe, and they're really tight with each other, so you can't just get up there and easily put things together. I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with it. I think I'm probably going to end up having to take everything out and then bring them somewhere and have someone weld in a couple flex sections one at a time, and hopefully I can get something that's not very big, so I don't have to worry about clearance issues, because they're right next to each other. It's a pretty tight fit. So that's the latest thing I got going on with this thing right now. So the car, I wouldn't say has been hasn't been exactly trouble-free, but it's it hasn't been too bad compared to some other cars. So that's kind of the bad of what the car is. And then I got the ugly. This car was parked on the street, and someone decided to steal a car and drive down the wrong way on a one-way street and hit the back of the car. Luckily enough, it didn't do that much damage. It just caught the rear bumper. But while I was still living in the city, I was like, I'm not going to get this thing painted, because as soon as I get it painted, someone else is going to hit me. So I just kind of left it. And now that I don't live in the city anymore, now I'm going to go get the bumper painted in the back. So that will take care of the ugly on the car. And also my other ugly is the my front brake rotors. So I ordered a kit for this. It's like power stop rotors. I did order their whole kit. It gives you a couple different sizes, and the first one was 350 millimeters, 360 millimeters, and 390 millimeters as far as rotor diameter. Well, I'm like, well, this thing is a base. I don't see why this thing would have the middle of the rotor size. You know, that would probably be for like an S or something like that. I'm like, well, this is the base. That's the V6. I'm gonna order the rotor diameter of 350 millimeters. Well, I was wrong. So this is before I had a garage. I went over to a buddy's house and I started to do my brakes over there, and unfortunately the wrong size and the old ones, because I hammered them off, couldn't put it back on anymore. So right now I've been driving around with some really cheap AutoZone rotors, pads and rotors on there. Luckily enough, they actually had them in stock, so I was able to get the car back and going again because it was in my buddy's driveway. These are the cheapest rotors I put on there because I'm like, I'm gonna put something better on. There's rust embedded in them, and it doesn't matter how much you drive it or anything, there's still rust on the surface of the rotor. It just doesn't go away. So eventually I'll get rid of that. So this is the good about the car. This is why I like this car, and I really, really like this car. It is really comfortable to drive. No matter how long I've taken this on a drive, I just never get tired of driving this car. And also for an SUV of its size, I mean, this thing, even the base model, and with the 22s on there, it actually handles pretty decent. It's just, you know, all around car, it's just been fun to drive. Really comfortable, fun. Gas mileage, you know, on the highway, I can see almost 24 miles a gallon. I mean, I think that's actually pretty decent for a car of this size. You know, that's what I find really good about it. I just, you know, for me, being a bigger guy, having you know, having something that's really comfortable is really important. Sometimes some cars, you know, I'd be driving them for a while, and then my leg would fall asleep or something like that. And so this thing, I don't have any of those issues in this, so that's why I like it. And you know something, even with the V6, even the 300 horsepower V6, I know it's not a lot of power, but around in the city, get up and go, driving around, you know, stoplight to stoplight, it's actually, you know, it's got some pep to it. It's only when you start getting on the highway is that you actually start seeing that this thing doesn't really, you know, it's lacking, and it definitely could use an additional 100 horsepower like the S. Like, I think the S is definitely where this really should be as a car, just the base 400 horsepower. I mean, it is a Porsche. It should have some balls. You know, we'll get to the styling on this thing, and you know, it definitely, you can see where its heritage comes from. You can see you know, the lines that kind of follow, you know, how the 911 is, and you can see the evolution of this car. And that's one thing I liked about Porsches, that, you know, that you've seen the, you know it's a Porsche, you know it is, you know, and it's just got that look, it's just got those lines, it's got the thing, it's got the hips, you know, even this thing has got a little bit of a little bit of a hip in the back of it. I've personally find that look really nice, and I've always enjoyed looking at these cars, and it's held up really well over the years. I mean, I've used this thing to move twice. I mean, I've loaded stuff in this car constantly. I carry my kids around, the dog around. You know, the interior is held up really well. You can definitely tell it's really good quality material that they're using in this thing. You know, it's not falling apart. I've had some other cars where I've done a quarter of that, and the interior just looks like crap afterwards. But this thing, you know, it's held up really nice, and you really can't tell once, you know, if you go through this thing, you clean it up, you shine it, you really can't tell that this thing's got 90,000 miles on the interior. I mean, it really looks so close to what it looked like when I bought it, you know, and that was 40,000 miles on it. This car held up really well, and I don't see any reason why you couldn't easily get 150,000 miles on this car without the interior falling apart on it. Mechanically, well, that's another story. I'm going to try to get at least another 50,000 miles out of this thing, and I have a feeling that I'm going to have to start rebuilding the front suspension shortly, probably starting around 100,000 miles. I'm going to start going through it and start replacing some parts, because the roads around Boston aren't exactly the nicest, and they definitely would wear a lot on the suspension of this car, so I can definitely see myself having to replace a lot of those parts. So one of the cool mods I did on the inside over here is I put this Redline phone mount, and I tell you, this phone mount is great. Magnetic, nice and easy to use, takes up very little space over here. So and what's nice about it too is you know, you can put it on either side depending on your preference. If you're thinking about getting a mount and you haven't figured out what you want, I would suggest getting this one. I'm actually really happy with it. So the couple things I do wish actually had in this car that I don't is I wish it actually had like a regular USB port. If I had the controls on the radio for my iPod, you know, it doesn't have heated seats either. Heated seats would be really nice. The wife's car's got heated seats. I love heated seats. I can tell you though, when it's time to replace this car, I'm definitely gonna get another Cayenne. This thing has been just so much fun to drive. Except the next time, I'm definitely not going to get the base model with the little VR6 engine. I'm definitely going to have to get something a little bit bigger. But now the new ones, they come, they're all turbocharged. I don't know how I feel about having all that stuff. Doing the PCV valve was a pain, but you know, for the most part, it's not that hard to work on. You know, I got plenty of room. I can see what's going on in there. I can kind of maneuver around. But man, if you start putting those new V6s they got, they're all turbocharged. You look down there, I mean, everything is just buried underneath covers. I mean, you can't see anything. It's one of those things, is like someone that's doing it at home. I don't have a lift, so I can't really get underneath the car. It's kind of hard to see. You know, it just makes it really hard to work on it. But I guess if I did buy something like that, I'd have to make sure I get it where it's new enough, where it has a warranty on it, so I can just bring it to the dealer and let them deal with it. I'll just stick to working on my 911, which is a lot more fun, and I can actually see the car. I can actually see the engine underneath there, and I can see what's going on. So if you're thinking about getting one of these, what I would suggest is to make sure that the person's changed the water pump based on the mileage. You know, to see he's got 60,000 miles and hasn't done a water pump, it's going to need a water pump. Make sure that the transfer case is good. Make sure it doesn't growl. Make sure there's not bucking, that it doesn't have a little shutter. Because that's what they start doing when the fluid is bad in there. And sometimes you can get away with just changing the fluid. Like mine, I got away with just flushing the fluid out a bunch of times. But if you let it go for too long, I can see how it can get a lot of damage in there, and then you won't be able to actually, you know, get it to work properly, even if you flush it. And also another thing too is the PCV valve. If that hasn't been done, I would imagine around 90,000 miles, 100,000 miles, it's going to go bad, and so you should work that into how much you're going to pay for this car. Because if you bring it somewhere, it's not exactly a cheap job. It's quite labor intensive. But all in all, I still would buy another one of these things, as I said. But I wouldn't buy the V6. I want more power. You know, that's definitely what I want. I definitely want more power with it. But like I said, driving around town, no problem. Highway, could use a little more. So this is Kevin's European Garage. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll have more videos coming soon. Thanks.